Hello everyone and welcome to episode 17 of Zion's Finest. This is Kenny Brown. This episode is going to be a continuation of that doomed project, at least doomed to any kind of ultimate fruition, which is going to be a tier list review. We're going to be doing a review of the secondary units that have been released in the game. I am not in this episode. It is going to be Matthew Scott is going to lead the discussion. He's joined by Samuel K, Scott Paul, and JK. It's going to be a lot of fun. Before we get into that, again, as always, join the Slack, rate, review, and like the podcast wherever you're listening to it, please, so that we can increase its reach. If you're watching on YouTube, we'd love it if you'd give it a like, and subscribe to the Zion's Finest channel. If you're on Spotify, iTunes, please give us a review, and let us know how we can improve. We love knowing how we can improve, and we take criticism of all kinds, constructive and positive and negative, so just give it to us. We will love it. Okay, so October 14th, we are having our Zi-Fi tournament. That is next week. So this episode's releasing on Monday. The following Saturday, it is going to be at Demolition Games in Salt Lake City. The tournament buy-in is $10. We are going to have custom tokens that we are going to be giving out. So the promos have shipped, but I have not been able to. So the company that I use is called Make Playing Cards. We have used them before. I will say that the time betwixt the final printing and the receipt is sometimes there's a little bit of a lag, and it said they had shipped 2 weeks ago, but I'm not positive that we're going to have them by Saturday. So yeah, but I think we are actually still going to be able to have the initiation kit as a not as a giveaway, but as prize support. I'm going to talk with Demo about that. But if you're in Utah and you're available next Saturday, you should come to the October 14th demo tournament. It's going to be a ton of fun. We have got a link to register on Longshanks, and you should register just so we have an idea as to player count. And I don't think there's anything more to say than that. It starts at 1 p.m. It'll go for 3 rounds. It's going to be super fun. It's a premier event, but obviously it's going to be, we are casual competitive. We are there to have fun and improve and just play the game. So mostly this is an opportunity for us to play a premier format event. So if you are new to the game, we would love it if you would show up, and you will have a ton of fun with us. After that, it's kind of crazy to say this, but there's not really a ton else going on, at least on the event front, until LVO. We're going to have to start doing a better job about canvassing the community to see what other events are going on, if there are any, because I don't have anything. I know it's the holidays, and so things tend to quiet down, at least now. It used to be actually with IA, was the holiday season was when we were having regionals and everything like that. It was actually kind of crazy, but now we don't really have anything like that. So looks like LVO is the next thing that's going to be coming up for Shatterpoint. Okay, so, and in conjunction with that, if you're planning to go, we still are, I think we're actually pretty good on painted terrain, but if you're planning to go and can bring terrain, you should plan to do that. I know there's going to be a lot of people who are going to play in other events and will also be playing in Shatterpoint, and so we would love it if you would do that. We have the After Hours event, which is sold out again, but if you are planning to play, there will be people, and I am pretty confident table space there available most of the time to play games. So anyway, just plan for that. Okay, recent content roundup. Momentous Struggle released an awesome episode on things that they're hyped for, and I will say one thing that came up in their discussion was they were talking about, I'm not positive who it was who brought this up, but I think it was Todd, brought up the fact that a lot of players are burned out on the current mission pack and how excited he is for new missions. And that's something that, to be honest, that has not been a concern for me, but I have been hearing more of those rumblings that people are really ready to be done with the current mission set and just hoping that the next mission set shakes things up a little bit. I am not so sure that will be the case. Maybe. I guess we'll kind of see how the new missions interact with the current spread of units. But I think what we're going to need is eventually there's going to need to be some rebalancing, I think, of the Separatist figures. Maybe, specifically of Jango, Magna Guards is kind of the direction that I think they're going to go before we see too much shakeup in the meta. But who knows? We'll see. It'll be good to know how that mission pack is going to interface with things, and it is releasing at the end of the month. Hello There released a podcast episode on building a premier list, and I will say that we are also going to be doing this. It's a really good episode and has a lot of things to be thinking about as you're preparing for your premier format events. And I think that this is kind of a tangent, But I think it's a really good idea in your local community to encourage an extremely low stakes premier kind of event. Maybe it's just something like a 2-rounder premier event. It's a casual, there's not like any competition, or no one's going to worry about losing or anything like that. But just having an event where you can get practice building and playing premier events, as opposed to just playing, the thing that you want to play. I mean, obviously on a casual night, that's totally fine, but it's really good to get premier format experience. So they have a great episode on that. And after we have done the October 14th tournament, which is actually weirdly, that's going to be our first time playing in a premier event, then we will have also our thoughts to bear, especially because Matt and I are going to be playing in this. And I think we're bringing a slightly different take in terms of how to approach it. So we'll see how that goes. Okay, last things, and then I'll be done. I'm sorry. So first off, Matt Lansdowne is a good brother he's on the Slack. We have known him for a long time. He played IA with us. He's an extremely good player. He's out in Kansas. And he made a post talking about struggles that he has had building a local community and how hard it has been to get players engaged and to stay engaged. And I am just going to say that is a very real struggle when you've got a game. It's new, and so you'd think there'd be a ton of enthusiasm, but it's kind of at this weird confluence where a lot of the players that you would think would be interested in it are playing Legion or burned out on AMG, not AMG, but specifically something more like FFG. And it doesn't feel like your efforts are really paying off. You should know that is a widely shared sentiment. It is very lucky to be able to play consistently with a group of players who enjoy and are dedicated to the game. And so I feel for every player out there who's, you are alone and you're not able to get people to show up for game nights and you're struggling to get stores invested in growing the community. That is really hard to do. We're going to share some thoughts on this in the future. We have built a pretty good core of okay, there is no way I'm going to get into this now. I will just say that for us, what we have had here in Utah, we have been very fortunate to have a good community, which is largely not the result of our efforts. There have just been a lot of really good players who are passionate about the game, and we've just all been able to kind of find each other. And so it is not the case that you just got to get lucky, but as they say, it's better to be lucky than good. And I think there are some principles about building a community for a game like Shatterpoint that could be applicable, and we're going to talk about that. But I think the bigger thing is that if you are feeling alone in your efforts to build the community, you should just reach out to people on the Slack. We are happy to whine about it, listen to you whine about it. We are happy to play games with you on TTS, to discuss and brainstorm things that we can do. One thing we did with Imperial Assault is we had these custom tournament kits that we made. This is wild to think about how nuts we were in terms of getting involved with this. But we had custom promo cards, custom tokens that we made and sent out. And that's actually become a little bit easier to do as technology has improved and the capital for those kind of things has been more widely distributed. So that's something that we could talk about. Really, it's just something that I think requires a lot of collaboration. But just know that you're not alone. We love you. We appreciate your effort. And let's see if we can figure that out. Sorry about that, dog. Okay. More things. And then I really am done. If you have content that needs to be promoted, you can feel free to post on the Slack or let me know if you'd like a shout out on the podcast. I'd be happy to do it. If you have results from tournaments that are, for some reason, if you're not uploading them to Longshanks because you're not on Longshanks, you should feel free to let us know on the Slack. We would really love to get all the tournament data results that we can as the game, as the organized play is ramping up. Okay, and that's it. So this episode is going to be a preview of Secondary Figures. It's a little bit longer, which has not been helped by my extremely long introduction, my prolegomena, as Benjamin Varnum would say. But it's a really good episode, obviously. I think this is actually a lot more straightforward of an episode than the primary tier lists were when they released what they had. When the brothers released the tier list in its final form, I looked at it and I was like, yeah, I agree with everything on here. There might be a little bit of wiggle room between one or the other, but I don't think it's super controversial. And so obviously Jango, spoiler alert, is kind of in a tier of his own, although we think that OB2 is in a similar tier, if very clearly in second place. But anyway, just something for you to know. Okay, that's it. Enjoy the podcast. Love you all.
Hello, and welcome to Zion's Finest, a Star Wars Shatterpoint podcast. My name is Matt Richards. I am here with JK and Sam and Scott. More importantly, we are here to do the second iteration in our tier list. So today we're talking secondaries. Before we dive into the meat of it, I know we had really just one item of business. There have been a lot of other great content creators out there in the space making some great stuff for content. Scott, I know that you had one in particular you wanted to call out.
Yeah, so if you speak Spanish or are more comfortable with the Spanish language, there's a great YouTube channel and podcast called Puente 3 or Puente Tres. I'm not sure what they prefer there, but check them out if you are looking for Spanish language Shatterpoint content. They helped us out a lot with our Google form, getting that out to the Spanish-speaking world. So, yeah, check them out.
Excellent. Great. So, in our last episode, or I guess 2 episodes ago, we did a discussion on the primary units in the game and did a quick tier list on that. I was actually not here for that one. I have swapped out for Kenny in this one, and we're going to do another video in the future for supports. Today, we're just talking about secondaries. And we wanted to, before we dive into the units specifically, we wanted to tee up a little bit like, hey, what are we looking for in a secondary? What is a secondary's job in your list? The reality of that is that a secondary unit can do a lot of different things. There's no hard taxonomy for that. But the 2 categories, or almost the spectrum that we have landed on, is that there are some secondary units that are just very independently powerful. They are there to show up and to do a job, and they will do that job. If you're comparing that to, there are a lot of secondaries that will be much more squad leader or synergy focused. So they're not as focused on what that unit themselves does, but how they empower the rest of the units in your squad to do what you need them to do. We wanted to set up that framework because it's going to be useful as we talk through all of the different secondaries and what role they fill as a quick summary. But just know that is not a hard and fast rule. There is going to be some variation depending on how much a unit is built around what they're supposed to do or how much they're enabling other units. So, without much further nonsense, JK, do you want to lead us out with Bo-Katan?
Bo-Katan, the Pride of Mandalore. We chose to start with Bo-Katan because she is a very good baseline figure. She is a B-level figure, and B isn't bad. She does a lot of things well. She doesn't do a lot of things spectacularly. She does require Mandalorian support of some groupings. She is in that support role where synergy really matters with her. Getting her extra moves, getting her dashes, her heals, all those things. She is not the tankiest. She is not the most damagey support. But she is just good at everything that she does. She's just not elite at kind of anything she does. I guess you could argue that her moving around people with Pride of Mandalore is that. But again, you have to have Mandalorians to do it. And that's kind of why she pulls down a little. I will say, I think in the next mission packs that are coming, the Killbox style closer range things, so some of us serve a higher purpose. Giving protection and steadfast is going to be a lot better, and that could elevate her. That's my general thoughts on Bo. I think that's mixture of C. There's better figures, there are worse figures. I'm not even saying she's actually average per se, but I think in the bell curve she's a B.
I think that is definitional as average. Like the top of the bell curve. That's what average means.
Yeah. I really like the spot for Bo. Yeah, I think that she's a very solid figure. Again, to your point, like B is not bad, B is solid. She's not super standout in any way. I definitely agree that she has the potential to rise in the future, especially as we get more synergy with Mandalorians. I think
Yeah.
that if we get some primaries or some other stuff there, she has a lot of potential to become more relevant. And she's limited a little bit by just the how narrow her synergies are. But I think she's a great unit to have on the board.
Yeah, I'm not terrified of her, but I'm not pleased to see her when I'm playing against her. And I think it's worth it for us to, for anyone that didn't see the previous episode or listen to the previous episode, to kind of reference, like, yeah, B, we put like Mace Windu and Ahsoka at B. It's like really solid figures, maybe not doing crazy stuff, but really solid. You're not going to have a bad time with them. Whereas A is like, hey, really strong, not sort of overtuned, but really, really solid, above a staple. Whereas S is above and beyond, great everywhere, really no weaknesses. C being requires a lot of help, and D being there's no helping them. And I think Bo sits right there. Like, she doesn't need a ton of help, but she benefits from it, and she's super solid. She's not doing overly much, but she's not a weak point. You don't hate activating her. She's not a Shatterpoint card you hate to see.
She really feels like Mace Windu, but a secondary. And for Mandalorians, not Galactic Republic, which is why they're kind of in the same tier.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. All right, let's talk Kalani Super Tactical Droid. Sam, what you got for us?
Yeah, so I think Kalani is an example of an A tier figure. He gives incredible movement, especially Struggle 1, to all your supports, as long as they're droids. He gives an extra dice to all of your support droids, which is massive. An extra dice is not quite an extra step on every attack, but is closer to being one than not. And his active ability is incredible. It's movement plus another effect, being an attack or hunker, recover. He's just an incredible figure. His one weakness, though, is that he does, as this game goes on, his tactics ability becomes less impactful, as there's less people close to him to move around, and he does not have his own movement besides on his tree, where he does have a reposition, so he doesn't have any extra bonus movement. Despite that, he does so much for your list that I just can't see him being below an A.
I might actually argue that he belongs in S. I think that's maybe controversial. I think that he is arguably the best turn one activation in the game. And I think that the number of synergies and things that he turns on for Separatists is just phenomenal. The amount of flexibility, the amount of out of activation movement. I would probably be inclined to put him S, but I would settle for top of A for sure.
That's unconscionable. He is definitely not S. Like, get out of here. Solid A, absolutely. But like, when I think about who we are going to put in S tier, which we'll get to that later, like, he's not on the same level as those secondaries. Like, I'll put him in A. I'll put him top of A. That's fine. But he as an individual doesn't do enough. Like, obviously, like, we're not judging him the same way we're judging primaries. But yeah, he's got all this great support, but him individually as a figure doesn't hit as hard. And so I think if he did, sure, S. But otherwise, with just the supports, which are great, A tier.
I will say, I think the reason he's an A tier and not an S tier is just that he needs people to do what he does. You can't just drop him into a list and be the best figure on the list. He is going to be the best figure if you're running droids and he does crazy, stupid things. And if we get some better droids down the line, which we might, I don't know, he could be elevated into where you just go, yeah, you have to take him because he's that good. But I think right now he is, that right at that top of the A list.
I think that's fair. I mean, I think that if you're bringing him, it's because you're building around battle droids, And I think that there are plenty of worse things in the game to build around the battle droids, but I'm happy to be outvoted on that one.
I feel you, Matt, for sure. I remember playing against him the first time and just thinking, that guy's absurd. Like, what am I supposed to do about him?
Here's the thing about Kalani is you can, if you have good displacement, you can really shut off what he's doing. If you force push him away so he's in the middle of nowhere and then pin him, then your Kalani activation can be real sad. So he does have some
Fair.
counterplay.
Fair. All right, let's move on. I think top of A for right now. We'll see where he lands relative to other figures in the A tier as we move forward. Scott, let's talk about Obi-Wan Kenobi Out of Hiding, also known as Obi-2.
Yeah, so Obi-2, glad we go to this, right? I'll start with that. I think that Obi-2 is an S tier figure. General thoughts are he is probably the owner of the best force ability in the game. Mind Trick is devastatingly oppressive in terms of being able to send him out on a point. And unless they have displacement outside of attacks, you just say, this is my point. You either come bring two figures, or you have Asajj or Maul or someone who can pull me off, like Jango. Otherwise, this is my point. Oh, you want to attack my friend over here to wound him? Sorry, you can't. Attack somebody else with -2 dice. Or maybe attack nobody if I've got Magna Guards or something. He shuts them down in such a oppressive way that it's so great and awful at the same time. In addition, his ability to run or heal at the beginning of his activation makes him super mobile, basically getting 2 advances. I mean, not even better than that, a reposition and an advance. And offensively, he's not devastating, but when you give him 3 dice with Darth Vader, if you're pairing him, then you've got a pretty offensive powerhouse that can take out a lot of mid-level stuff, a lot of secondaries, a lot of supports. So no slouch when it comes to his offensive capabilities, a lot of healing. He's just a really, really strong secondary. That this is what I think elevates Obi-2 over Kalani, is that he fits everywhere. There's no list he's not good in. He's very independent. He helps everybody. There's no list that you would hate to see him in. So he's just a super solid S for me.
I think more than any other figure in the game right now, well, in the future, you're going to be able to put Obi-2 everywhere because of his dual timeline identity. You can put him with your original trilogy and with your prequel trilogy stuff. He's going to be fantastic. His run also benefits other people. It's harder to set up, but moving just anybody else who's engaged is also just an incredible option to have. Like easy S tier for Obi-2.
Run is so good because on top of being able to move yourself, you get to move anyone on the board. And that is wild. Anything that is limitless range is just wild. Yes, there's a caveat, but also, how often do you go, okay, I'm going to pin that dude, I'm going to step on top of him so that he can't go anywhere, and run activating, you heal the pin, and then you just reposition your way out of there, completely changes an activation for something else in there, on top of Mind Trick being Mind Trick being Mind Trick.
Absolutely.
This is the support you're looking for. Too soon on that?
No, absolutely. I think that what I would add is I think Obi-2 is really the pinnacle of a secondary that you want if you're just running a good stuff list, right? He slots in everywhere. He's going to do a great thing. I do think that I could see in the future, if the game develops in such a way that we're a little bit more focused on keyword synergies and a little bit less on just run the good stuff, I could see his stock dropping a little bit. I also think that he is the beneficiary of the fact that there are some really great 7-cost primaries in the game, or 7-point granting primaries in the game, and the fact that Magna Guards are too good for a 3-cost support. And that allows him to enable a lot of stuff that, again, I think that his stock could fall in the future if we saw Magna Guards get changed, or if we saw a bit of a shift that way. I could see him not aging as well as some other figures, but I think unquestionably he's S tier. He is right up there at the top. Great. Well, let's talk about Captain Rex, my dude. I love Captain Rex. I think that he is just pound for pound the best secondary with the Galactic Republic keyword. If you're playing or leaning into Galactic Republic as a keyword heavily, I think he is just the first secondary that you take. There are some instances, I think, where if you're depending on the synergies that you're building around, that he may get pushed out by, a couple of other options. But I think his tactics ability is incredible to just dash and give a hunger token to any Galactic Republic figure, including himself. I think that especially synergizes well with the Galactic Republic, which is the faction where all but one of their primaries are melee only figures who often struggle to be in a reasonable range to impact the game state with their first activation. So that's great. Out of activation movement's always great. He also can dash himself, so if you need him to really hustle and get somewhere, he can do that. His attack is super reasonable. He's got a damage focus side, and his other sort of part of the tree is 2 shoves in 2 steps, which is phenomenal. He's reasonably defensive. He is the tankiest clone that we have at this point. I think he's a very solid A secondary, and I think you're pretty hard pressed to leave home without him if you are playing Galactic Republic or Clone Synergy.
Rex scares me when I see him activated, especially second struggle, second rotation through, shuffle through. Rex is someone who I always go, oh crap, Rex hits. I have to rethink, like, as an opposing player, because he can move, push, adjust, take shots. You really have to pay attention to where he is, and high skill players are going to take advantage of that. And I agree that I think he's an an A tier, figure, and the best of the Republic, probably.
I don't know if he's the best secondary in the Republic. Probably. I think, as Matt said, there are situations where there might be a better secondary, but he's absolutely A tier. He's offensively strong, defensively strong, great movement, gives good synergies. I actually think, and maybe this is a hot take, that if clones were better, he'd be better than Kalani. I think he's just, if clones were better and droids were worse, that's the thing, is that everything on his card is just as good, if not better, than Kalani. Plus, he does better as an individual. He just doesn't have as strong of things to bring and as strong of things to synergize with.
Yeah, I think the fact that he synergizes with clones who we view as pretty weak for supports, especially support units, and he still lands an A tier speaks really, really well to his kit, and especially to how well future-proofed it is.
Yeah. ARFs help a little bit, and I'm hoping that Wolfpack will help. I think that, especially with Wolfpack being a melee-centric clone trooper, and his melee being really strong, you could do Vader, Rex, Wolfpack, and maybe do something really cool there, but we'll have to see.
Yeah. I think that, like, the Vader, Rex, ARF squad is very respectable right now, honestly. Yeah. And I think that is one of the contexts where, like, maybe you want to look at a different secondary sometimes in that spot, or some different configurations. But even so, I think he's competitive. So, like, even in the cases where you might be considering something else, he is still in the conversation in the cases where you want him, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have nothing really to add. He's a solid A tier figure. One of his other weaknesses, I should say, is that his out of activation attack does cost a force, which in the force hungry lists of the Republic is sometimes kind of rough when you compare it to some of the other secondaries. But it's still a great ability, still worth paying for unless he's wounded.
Yeah, I will say, as somebody who's played a lot of Galactic Republic, I am almost never using that ability just because the force budget is so tight. But it is
Yep.
nice to have it there if you need it, right? So, awesome. Let's talk Gar Saxon Merciless Commander.
Gar, my opinion, is worse than Bo, same level as Bo. B tier. I could actually maybe argue that it's C tier just because you have to bring all the Mandalorians. He's built offensively. He is better at range with the I've got you in my sights. But he doesn't have a spike damage per se. He does he tops out at 8, which is enough to kill supports. Like, it's not a bad tree, but it's the same amount as Bo, and he does have a push pin push combo at the top of his tree, which is fantastic. He's got the same defense as Bo, the same general thing as Bo. I just think Bo, especially over time, is going to get better. I don't know that Gar is going to get exceptionally better at any point. I think you put him in B, but tear me apart, gentlemen.
So
No,
I think Gar is a better displacement piece than Bo. I think that's the biggest thing, is that because he has a shove in his expertise tree, he hits basically just as hard in melee because of his adding additional dice, as long as there's another Mandalorian also in melee. Plus his ranged is really great. I think if you want displacement, Gar is your go-to. And I think that that's a powerful thing to have in Shatterpoint. I still think they're equal. I don't think I started out as of the opinion that Gar's a little bit worse than Bo. I don't actually think so. I think that he just fills a very different role, that he can hang back or come up close, whereas Bo must get in the thick of things. And that displacement added element, I think, is different enough that he does something powerful but similar.
absolutely. I'm right with you, Sam. He has that range or melee. They both have the flexibility of movement. They're both helping enable Mandalorians. I would put them absolutely both on B tier. I'm fine if we put Bo above him. I'm also not opposed to above Bo. I think she probably does a little bit better, but I think they're neck and neck generally, which, considering they're the two Mandalorians sort of on the opposite side, I think that's actually probably really well designed.
Yeah, they're very, very similar figures. I think I'm going to make the case to put Gar slightly below Bo, for two reasons. I agree with everything that's been said. I think that Gar is the more offensively positioned one, whereas Bo is more defensively positioned. And I think part of what we've seen in the game in general is being able to stick to and hold 2 points is really, really valuable. I think that the other thing that I will call out is, JK mentioned this, but I agree with this. I think that Bo has more potential to age well as we get more Mandalorian synergy, whereas I think that Gar is a little bit. I'm less confident of that. I think Gar has kind of a lower skill floor. It's easier to screw up what you do with him than it is with Bo, and so, like, for all of those reasons, I think they're very, very close. But I'm going to put Gar a little bit below Bo.
Yeah, I don't think you can go wrong either way. I think Bo's Mandalore will survive, which gives the focus dash heal is incredible with all of the rolling stacking activations for essentially free, stacking movement for essentially free, just makes her really good. But yeah, I think Gar is good. I don't hate either of them. I think Gar over time might lose a little bit of luster. It could surprise me also and go the other way, so who knows?
They're close enough that I think it is as close to just a preference selection as anything that you're going to see in the game. Great, let's talk Kraken Super Tactical Droid.
Yeah, I think Kraken is at the actual top of A tier. He is my next closest to being S tier of all the other secondaries, besides kind of the obvious ones. This is for a couple of reasons. One, he's like Kalani, significantly tankier, and is harder to shut down. Shoving Kraken off into a corner will still allow Kraken to do his thing because his tactics ability is universal and he can move himself. His damage is a little bit lower, and not giving the extra dice is a drawback, but the added defense with the steadfast protection and the universality of his tactics, I think, is my preference for the two. Plus 4 points slots in to more lists. So I would put him at the very top of A tier.
That's interesting, Sam. I think he's in A tier as well. I don't know that he is above or below Kalani for me. He is absolutely more defensive and has some interesting abilities that are better than Kalani. But Kalani obviously doesn't have sort of the universal aspect, but he's helping everybody within 4 move as opposed to just selecting 1. And they share half of their abilities anyway. Their ability to reduce the reserve cost as well as their tactical order that they can give out. So they're very similar to me. It almost feels like in certain lists, Kraken will be better, and certain lists, Kalani will be better. So for me, Kraken and Kalani are equally good, just different flavors of the same cereal.
They're very, very close, yeah. And I will definitely cede to your deeper experience playing Separatists, Sam, because mine is pretty limited. My brain, I think, tends to prefer Kalani, and I think that's mostly because I don't rate the 4 cost thing too highly, because most of the Separatist primaries that you're going to run him under are 8 cost, and the one that's the exception is Dooku. And I think it's when you're running Dooku, it's really hard to turn down Jango plus Magnus, and so I'm a little bit more inclined to for Kalani plus B1s over Kraken plus B2s, but I think it's very, very close. I think that the other thing that tips me more towards Kalani is that Kalani is stronger in the early game, whereas Kraken scales better into the late game. And I think that what we've seen from Separatists generally is that they are very strong early game. They're looking to build an early game advantage and then snowball that through to a win. And so I can see the argument either way to kind of minimize how hard you fall off versus maximize how strong you are early. I will absolutely cede to your expertise on this, but it's so close.
I will say, I haven't studied Kraken for a hot minute. I forgot how good his tree is. He has 3 displacements in 4 steps, 3 shoves in 4 steps, 2 shoves in 2 steps, or 3 and the ability to activate your tactical network. That's really good.
Yeah.
He also has
shove in 2 steps.
Yeah, he can pin shove in 2 steps. He also has incredible expertise dice.
Yeah. Kalani's a little bit more of an all-in, I am just supporting my team. I am a full squad leader. Kraken takes a little bit more onto himself in terms of what he can do offensively, but they're both very squad leader oriented secondaries. They're both great. Again, I think this one's mostly a preference call.
Kraken's better. Deal with it.
Okay, I will move everyone aside to make room for Kraken here, because
Look, we don't know what the verb is for Kalani, but we do know you have to release the Kraken.
Yeah.
So,
all right, let's talk Third Sister.
cool. So, Third Sister is, spoiler alert, is not going to be rated very high on this list.
No.
So, the issue with the Third Sister primarily is that she is locked into the Inquisitorius, which is full of some figures with potential and some figures that really just don't work. So as far as what she's doing, she has some interesting abilities that are really dependent on placement and really dependent on what your opponent has. They are not universally good, which in so many war games, in so many miniatures games, skirmish games, the bread and butter and determine of how good an ability is how universally applicable it is or how often it is relevant. So Call to Hunt, hypothetically great. Choose an allied Inquisitorius supporting character within 4. They can dash or make a 5-die attack. Pretty solid, except it costs you a force, and you have to have that Inquisitorius nearby you, which is going to be probably 5th brother. And so that does require her to be dealing with him, and you want them to be together, but you're already playing down figures, and so that limits the way you're spaced out. She's got force jump, she's got deflect, solid abilities, but then she has your fear betrays you, which might be one of the most pointless abilities in the game. For a force, when she makes a melee attack, as part of that like combat action, she can remove an opponent's condition to add 2 dice to her attack, which if you're looking to wound someone, hypothetically that's useful. But if you're running Inquisitors, you're running Darth Vader, so he's already giving 3 extra dice, and her damage caps out at 7. It's not very damaging. Hypothetically, it could cap out at 8 because she can get an auto damage from her expertise, but she's just not really getting a lot of value there. She's just really under the curve in a lot of ways, and she's trapped in a list that isn't flexible with its building, requires you to build around it, and even then, it's not necessarily doing enough to be competitive with what Separatists are doing, with what other lists are doing. Maybe against certain Grand Republic lists, it's really good. Some people have seen success with it. I have tried it out, and I've had a little bit of success with Inquisitors, but I always feel like I'm playing from behind. And that's not a super comfortable feeling in a game where you don't have to feel like that. So I am going to put her in the D tier.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that really well covers it. I think that the thing that's awkward about her, like in addition to being kind of under the curve on everything, she is very clearly built to be in a squad with both Grand Inquisitor and Vader, and she doesn't quite pull her own weight. She's in that awkward place where the best thing to do with her is to pair her with Vader, and Vader has like 7 other things he would rather be doing. And I think that just puts her in a really awkward spot. I think that ability where she can remove conditions to add dice, to me, that feels like a ripcord that allows you to access a little bit more consistency at the cost of force in the case where she's not hanging with Vader. But like you said, her tree is not impressive enough. I think it's only 5 steps to where you can really like stack on the dice. If she had like a 7 or 8 step tree that was very like, if you invest a lot, she can really spike, I think there would be potential there, but
yeah,
she just isn't cutting it.
And your opponent also has to have the condition.
Yep.
And it costs a force. Like, what are you removing? Not only does it have to have a condition, it has to have a condition that you're willing to remove, which is disarm. There's literally nothing. Why would you take away anything else? Strain is constricting. Pin is backbreaking. Expose, you're attacking them. Like, that's the thing you're doing right now. So it literally is just disarm that you're trying to remove for a force to get 2 extra dice, to get even the final 2 steps are 3 damage, a push, and a jump, which is nothing to snuff at, but it's just, I don't know.
And if you're running Inquisitors, the only conditions you're really giving out with consistency is the expose from Fifth Brother and the pin from Fourth Sister.
Yeah, there's maybe something to be said for that. I forget what it's called, but it's the Inquisitor version of the concentrated fire or coordinated fire in Feeble. But the range condition there, yeah, it just doesn't quite get to where you would like to be, and it costs a force. Like, you could probably discount that to be free, and you still wouldn't use it very often.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Call the Hunt seems out of... You compare it to Kraken or Kalani, where they can do both things for a single force, or Rex, who gives himself an attack and a dash for a single force. Like, it feels like you could get both, or that could be a tactics ability where you get one or the other.
Yeah. I think that you could very reasonably just make Third Sister a 3-cost secondary with the idea that you can run her plus another 4-cost Inquisitor support under Vader, and that would feel fine. Like, no issue there.
Yeah, I think the real issue, and this is true of every Inquisitor list you're going to be running, is that you're running 6 figures instead of 8. So you're already sort of limited in how you can position. And it's a list that is specifically designed to be most effective when your entire list is within 4 of each other.
Yeah, that's a great point. Any objections to D tier for Third Sister? All right. Well, I think she's about to have a friend in Commander Cody. Oh, Cody. Cody is a secondary who I love on paper, but he just does not quite get there. In theory, he's supposed to be your sharpshooter. He's supposed to be your big range damage dealer as a secondary who then kind of has some supporting stuff. He has one of, if not the only ability that grants rerolls for dice in the entire game, which should be cool, and it's a team effect, but it's range limited, and it's on clones who have a hard time really leveraging that added offensive capability. His tactics ability, I think, is probably the worst one in the game because it requires you get a free expose on somebody within range 5 at the start of his activation. That means it's not going off in the first round unless you're investing a lot of added mobility just to get a free expose. And he is squishy enough that if he's in range to be doing that, he is also very likely to just get smoked by the enemy before his activation comes up. And with ARF troopers in the game, there are just much easier ways to get access to expose before you attack. Finally, he's really, really limited on his mobility because he has that sharpshooter thing that gives him 3 total extra dice whenever he takes a focus action. And so he feels like a figure where his designated play pattern is you're supposed to defensive maneuver and then focus and then make a big ol' attack. And when he can pull that off, like, he can do damage, but he's not helping you contest victory objectives. He's not helping you score points. And the number of hoops that you have to jump through in order to turn him on so that he is having the impact that he's supposed to is just, the juice is not worth the squeeze. So I'm going to vote D tier for Cody also.
Yeah, I think one of the big things with Cody is that at the beginning of the game, when you have a lot of objectives that you can just kind of camp on and shoot, he's not in position yet. And as soon as he gets in position, the game has passed that point where now you want to spread out and you must be able to respond where the priority objective is. And his mobility is not good enough to do that and also get his big attack off. So he really struggles to be effective because of the pacing of the game.
Yeah. He also just struggles because I've talked about this a lot. Galactic Republic really has very few figures that actually want to be forward contesting objectives. Their supports generally are not good at it. Their primaries are good at it, but some of them kind of encourage you, like Obi-Wan, to reserve them. And they also, like, you feel bad just moving them onto a point if they don't get to attack somebody that's already there. And so what Cody also does is he adds another unit into your list that you cannot be proactive with. You are having to use him to apply pressure where your opponent already is, and he is not able to apply enough pressure to actually score that point. And so he's just kind of the bottom of the barrel in terms of Republic wants. Compared to Rex, there's just no reason to take Cody ever. And there are just so many other better options for a secondary, even if you're full Galactic Republic, even if you're full clones.
Here's what I think is the unfortunate situation for the Republic. Is just they have so much, we all want to be in this area supporting each other. And because, like you said, Cody's ability to let you reroll failures is fantastic, right? That's awesome. That's a cool ability. But it requires you to position to multiple figures. So if Cody had something like at the start of his activation, choose another like clone supporting unit, and each character in that unit can dash, that'd be awesome. That would really help with that positioning issue. But as it stands now, by the time they're set up to do, as Sam said, the time they're set up to do the thing that they're good at and they can actually like make these not so great clones a little bit better and actually maybe viable. The first struggle has ended. You're on to the second one. You're having to chase priority. It's not pretty.
Yeah. Sorry about you, Cody. Maybe someday you'll get an errata.
Bye, Cody. Hope you find your dad. Who's next?
Who is next?
Yeah, he's right now.
Jango, Fett, Bounty Hunter. What do you think? Pretty bad, right?
Yeah.
Easily D
Just the
tier.
worst character in the whole game.
So he has the highest damage output of a support character or a secondary character. He can spike at 10. He has arguably the best ability when it works in the game and not so fast. He gives you force refresh. He is one of the 3 most agile supports or secondaries in the game. He can move anywhere. He has pushes. He has displacement in the tree and out of the tree. He has 2 jumps.
And
Ladies
one of
and
those
gentlemen,
jumps
Jango
is a
Fett.
reward for taking a focus, which, why would
Yeah.
you ever want to take a focus?
It is really just wild how good Jango is. You want to use everything that he has all the time. I don't think we need to talk about it that much, but we can. I think not only is he the S tier, he is the single best figure in the game. Obviously, if you're going to have him fight Vader, but for being what he is, for being who he is, Jango is just the best thing in the game.
Yeah. At his cost, at his functions, he's the best figure in the game. Honestly, he and Obi-2 are sitting next to each other. And we had this discussion about, like, which is the best secondary, a few game nights ago. And thinking about it and really parsing it, Jango almost deserves a tier above S, like a Jango tier, because he is just so good. And what I was saying about Obi-2 being able to be splashed everywhere goes doubly for, yeah, exactly. It goes doubly for Jango. He fits anywhere because what he does is independent of anyone else. He doesn't require any synergies. He just flies off, pulls people off points, shoots them dead. They activate. I mean, it doesn't happen a lot, but there is no worse feeling for your opponent in this game than I'm going to activate this figure that I was kind of forced to activate because that's how this game goes. Oh, cool. I'm going to shoot them. They're going to die, and you're not going to get an entire turn. That is brutal.
You get, on average, 15 activations in a game. That's like 9% of your of your game is just gone if not so fast hits. It's over. Like, it is debilitating how much not so fast can hurt you. And if it's a primary, you're essentially losing 33% of a primary because, you figure you're going to hit them twice and then Shatterpoint maybe. And even that, if you're not going to Shatterpoint them, it's 50% of your activations for a primary is just gone. It is absurd. And yes, there's setup, and yes, there's stuff, but yeah.
Yeah. My not so fast is crazy because it is the only ability in the game that can just completely stuff any amount of action economy without interaction. The next closest thing is, hey, look, on Obi-Wan Kenobi out of hiding in his mind trick, he has to spend 2 force for that, and your opponent has to opt into it. They have to attack you knowing that you could respond with that. And even then, okay, they still get to do their attack, they just lose 2 dice. Whereas Jango, the other thing that's crazy is so much about this game is about rewarding you for being able to tell, can I consistently hit the breakpoints that I need to? Can I do enough damage to wound? Can I roll enough successes to get the shoves that I need to? And the thing about not so fast is that it actually is kind of better if you miss your breakpoint. Like, you would rather, as Jango, come 1 or 2 damage short of wounding somebody and then just place Jango in front of them, because there's the 80% of the time you're just going to completely stuff that activation and get to go twice. Like, my hot take is that you could just delete not so fast from Jango's card, just erase it from the card, and he's still an A tier figure.
Absolutely. You could get rid of the jump focus and he'd still be an S tier figure, getting rid of that entirely. So he absolutely is just top of the pack. And as we said, best figure in the game. Like if you had to rank every single thing in the game, I think he sits there. There's no downside to him.
Yeah, I agree with everything said. Plus, he has a pin on his capture wire. Like, even cuts your opponent's action economy even more.
It went from bad to worse for them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Capture wire, by the way, is a reverse force push that only costs 1 force for some reason.
That does more than a force push.
Yeah, it
doesn't push them as far.
Yeah,
no,
right. Or 3.
And it's in the opposite direction. But for that enormous downside, he just gets a 1 force cost refund. It's absurd. Blizzard,
and then
please
they'll
nerf.
shoot you and just get the force back anyway.
Yeah, let's move on from Jango. He's awesome. Let's talk about a character who I love, but is not quite as awesome. Snips, or Padawan Ahsoka. She is really cool. She's super mobile. She has an out of activation attack that costs no force, which is awesome. Even comes with a jump. She has a solid tree. She's a little squishy. She's good. She's solid. She's a B tier figure. Like, she does what you want her to do. She gives her extra movement. If you want mobility, if you want out of activation attacks, you bring her. And if you're like, I don't think I need that in the list, you can take some other primaries. But she's going to do a good job if you take her.
Yeah, Ahsoka's solid. I think she's really great at adding some vertical threat, especially for some of the Jedi like Mace who do not have a ton of vertical presence. She also is great with Vader for that reason, is she can supplement there as well and give him some extra movement. Not that he needs it, not that it makes any amount of sense for him to have the Galactic Republic keyword, but that is the world that we live in. I think she's potentially very solid. I'm very excited to see how she does with Plo Koon, who has some of those Padawan synergies. I also think that she has a lot of potential in the future for premier lists that are blended era because her movement goes to Jedi also. And so you can run a Galactic Republic list with her that's blended a little bit with some, with maybe Jedi Luke or some other era units, and she can provide some cross-era synergy there, which is very cool. She is squishy, and she feels a little bit like a budget primary, who doesn't quite do what you would like a primary to do, but is very solid. I think B tier is a great spot for her.
I think she is a perfectly designed character. Not that she's a perfect character, but she's perfectly designed. I think everything that she's supposed to be, she does exactly how it's supposed to be. I know that's kind of weird, but it's hard to design cards. We talk about S tier and D tier. It's hard to design these things, and I think they just absolutely nailed Padawan Ahsoka.
Yeah, agreed. The other thing I'll throw in with her really quick is that she was the other secondary that we were alluding to that sometimes can compete with Rex. I think that those contexts are if you're running some kind of Jedi or Galactic Republic primaries, but you don't necessarily have the clone unit synergy, but you want a little bit of extra movement. Sometimes that jump rather than the dash can be nice. Sometimes that extra synergy can be nice. So she's great with Vader. She's great with Anakin, but Rex is also still very competitive for those spots. Great. Let's talk Sabe.
Cool. So I'm going to correct Matt a little bit because Padawan Ahsoka might be what he was referring to as someone to compete with Rex, but I was talking about Sabe. I think Sabe is a solid A tier supporting character. I think that, we put Padme in the A tier, and I want to put Sabe in there for very similar reasons. The drawback that Sabe and all of the sort of Padme box has is they all have to go with each other. And that flexibility is limiting. So maybe that's what pushes Rex above. However, what Sabe enables is incredible. Sabe's, just her normal start of activation is all of your handmaidens get to dash towards a primary character. So you get 3 dashes. If you're running Cad Padme, that can be up to 4 or 5 dashes. if you've played your cards right, it may not be worth it, but it is hypothetically possible. So you've got great movement, you've got a really solid attack, you've got coordinated fire from Padme, you've got coordinated fire from the handmaidens that are helping her out, and she has her own coordinated fire, which acts as movement. So her ability to move around the board, take points, shift people around, one of the strongest aspects of that whole box is that Padme can give advances, Sabe can give dashes, Sabe gets dashes. So you're able to really play a really nice positioning game as you move into struggles 2 and 3 to reposition where you're at and contest those objectives. And she is a big part of enabling that. Not to mention that expose flank is a fantastic ability. You pay a force to get to climb and focus and then make a pretty dang good shot that is going to push people, deal damage, deal out conditions. And with Padme, you're dealing 2 extra damage, or with the handmaidens, you're dealing out conditions. So there's a lot of benefit there that I think Sabe is bringing as one of the best support characters in the game. Again, she is limited to the handmaidens and Padme. If those weren't such good figures, Sabe's stock wouldn't be as high. But I think what they do is so good that that inflexibility is overcome a little bit. So I would put her at A tier, right below Rex, but just barely.
Yeah, I think that assessment is spot on. I think that, to your point, Sabe is great. The new box is great. I think it's one of the best squads that the Republic has access to. And it's a great splash squad as well. It's very self-contained. Rex does get to add some additional support and synergy across squads for your whole strike team, which I think puts him slightly above for me. The other thing that I've said is that Galactic Republic shtick kind of seems to be, okay, you have to do a lot of very careful positioning work. And the Naboo box in general is kind of the first time where it actually feels like it's worth it. You actually get a reward that is commensurate to all of the effort that you've put into getting everybody in the right position. I do think that there can be some awkwardness where you're really at the mercy of your activation cycling, because if you pull Sabe first, or if you just don't pull Padme or a primary before your other stuff, some of those abilities can really, really whiff. That extra movement, that extra stuff. You can usually make a pretty good case for it, and you can work around it with reserving and other things. But there is I think a small feels bad territory where if you really get kind of hosed by your activation deck, it can really limit what they're capable of doing.
I will say, as a counter to that, in my experience, I can't speak for other people, I have never gotten Padme first, even reserving or otherwise. And what they're doing is still so good, I find it really doesn't make a difference, because I end up usually able to shatterpoint Padme almost every time in the list I'm running. And so I found that in the later game, I'm able to get benefit from all those abilities, and not having it in the early game, they're still good enough that it doesn't really hurt me all that much. Sure, you'd still like it, and that's still a great point, that it is subject, its optimization is dependent on this chance factor. So that is definitely a ding against them. But I still think what they're doing is good enough that that's enough to overcome it.
Awesome.
I'm a Padme lover. I love the Padme box. I think Sabe is incredible. I agree with all that. Even if you draw her first, if you have 2 Galactic Republic primaries, you can still advance forward because of how generous that angle is.
Right. Yeah, it's a great point. Awesome. Well, let's talk Commander Pons. So Commander Pons is unique in that he's the only 3-cost secondary in the game. And boy, does he feel like it. Pons feels lackluster on the table compared to every single other secondary in the game, or most every other. But my contention is I think he feels fair for a 3-cost secondary. I think that there have been a couple of units in the game, especially in the support space, where there's not a lot of distinction between, like, what is a 3-cost support supposed to do versus what a 4-cost support is supposed to do. Pons is... What I like about Pons within the context of Republic is you are not spending any force on him. He's giving you free mobility for your primaries or for other units. His deployment thing is cute. It's pretty mixed viability, but for the most part, what you're doing with it is cheating out a little extra distance so you can get your coordinated fire online. His attack at 6 dice is a little bit underwhelming, but his tree is solid. And so if he's not attacking into somebody who has like above average or better defense, he can get some work done. He has some shoves on there. He has some respectable damage. You are never going to be like, wow, Pons is up. I am stoked. He's going to get work done for me. But he allows you to play Mace, period. And I think that he is going to be a toolkit forever, especially for Republic, where if we had some really killer 4-cost clone supports in the game, and if we get some more 7-cost primaries, he is always going to be there to help tip things up. So I want to put him as a low B because of what he enables. I might have to fight for that, but that feels about right for me, given his cost, given the context of everything that's going on.
I think all things context-wise, I think he's a fair B, low B. The thing about him is he doesn't get worse over time. He's as good at the start of the game as he is at the end of the game. It's not great, but he doesn't become a tax. He is exactly who he is the whole time, and he is a perfectly fine 3-cost secondary.
Well, you say that, but he's the only one, so we have nothing to compare it to.
Exactly, perfectly fine.
I think I think putting in B tier is criminal. S tier for sure. No, I think. I was gonna say should he be D or C, but I'm gonna vote for C. I think, yeah, he's not costing you any force, and he's got, when you activate him, you can dash another Allied Galactic Republic, and he's giving you a little bit of positioning at the beginning. But in what realm? I want you to think about, in any game you've ever played with pawns, or just any game that you could hypothetically think about and say, gosh, I really hope I draw pawns next. If pawns had an ability that said, after the first time he activates, remove his card from the Shatterpoint deck and remove his figure, that would make him better in my mind. Because he is just never going to be an activation that can accomplish anything other than, hey, maybe if you get lucky, you can move to this point that nobody else is occupying and take it. He's just not mobile. He's not offensive. He doesn't have any abilities that really buff your people. He gives a little bit of movement, probably just at the start of the game. Everyone else has probably moved far enough away that it may not be relevant by the time you get there.
Hey, he does give all your clones within range 3 immunity to expose on the 0 times that you will ever remember to trigger it.
Yes, yeah,
that have hunker
to expose when they have hunker, which is definitely something they'll all have a lot.
I think unlimited range on that charge is a thing.
Yeah.
It gives you that random option of flipping him and moving someone onto a point that you might have lost, or that you can just take from out of nowhere.
Well, I wanted to say that Pawns is my definition of a C, a functional character that feels like he's a little bit underneath what you want to do with your list. He's a tax for bringing more powerful figures. He's playable, he's functional, he's fine, but I compare him to the other B tier figures. They are all things that I put in my list for their own merits, whereas he's coming in on the merits of another piece that he's enabling.
Yeah. What I was going to ask JK is, would you ever take him if you didn't have to?
I'm not going to underpay myself. Is that what you're like? I'm not going to play down a point for him.
Right, but even like if there was another third point secondary, which is completely hypothetical, but the idea is that playing up or down a point in this game to me is like whatever. Like you can play down a point with Cad Bane by taking Jango Fett. That's not a tax.
Well, I mean, I think like that is less to do, I think, with the points, and that has more to do with how strong Jango is. and some of the alternatives. And also, I brought this up earlier, but I do think that there has been a bit of a thing with supports where the quality difference in what you get for 4 points in a support versus the quality difference in what he gets to 3 is not quite as honed in as I would like. I am fine to put pawns in a C tier. I think for me, so they have been very, very cautious in designing him, and I think rightfully so, because I think if they overtune a 3-cost secondary, suddenly that can create a lot of things. I do think that right now he is living in a world where there are not a ton of real banger 4-cost clone supports that he could enable. If that changes, I think his stock goes up. I also think that the space for him is pretty limited because you run him with Mace right now, and that's it. You could also run him with Anakin so that you could take a better clone support. But even among clone supports, the distance between ARF troopers up to clone commandos, up to 212, is not that far. And so, like, right now, there is not a reason in the game to take pawns plus a 4-cost support over Rex plus a ARF troopers. But I think that potential could always be there. He's going to be a figure to watch, I think, going forward, just because of the list building things that he enables. But I will accept a C with some objectives. Yeah.
Oh, we're talking Savage.
Let's do it.
I think, just to start out, Savage is a C tier figure because he is a primary hunter. He is built to hunt primaries. He just can't kill them. His damage tree does not allow you to kill a primary. You can spike through and hit your Dark Fury and then roll into it. So in theory, you could one-shot them. But his single purpose is to hunt and kill primaries, and he is not powerful enough to do it. He has a lot of cool things. Pain as weakness is really good. Protection and steadfast, that's great. I actually really like his amount of out-of-activation movement he can do is if you're running Separatist or Dathomir. But the problem is, at the end of the day, he is not defensive at all. He is okay if you get the second expertise, but he's rolling 4 dice. He's just going to get killed, and you're not going to get your points back for him. At the end of the day, I really like him with Talzin. I think he's a fun figure. I think he's a really unique figure. I just think he kind of sits in that C tier.
Yeah, I think the only reason you bring Savage is because you need to pay into the Dathomir synergies to get the most out of the rest of your list. And he's going to be fine at it. I think it's very much like pawns. Like, I look at them and I see they fill a similar niche in list building, which is acceptable, but you're bringing them in order to get more value out of other things.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. I think you often will leave Savage at home if you are planning to run Talzin plus Night Sisters plus either Maul or Asajj, usually Maul. And at that point, yeah, you can leave him home and you have enough Dathomir bodies on the table that you don't miss him. I think he has a little bit more space in like a premier list where if you are throwing in Talzin and you just need that squad to be a little bit more self-sufficient and you don't have the space to run one of those primaries, that can make sense. But yeah, I think he's a damage-focused figure who lacks in durability and who can't spike by himself, and so he needs his targets to have been softened up already, which is useful, but is not as useful as what most other secondaries bring.
He is going to be a premier. I think because you will bring him in premier lists is what makes him not a D, in my opinion, because you're just never going to run Third Sister. You're never going to run Cody. Even if you're running full Galactic, you're probably trying to bring anyone else. But if you're running that Talzin as your 4th in a premier list, you're probably bringing Savage, and you're not going to be beaten up for it.
Okay. I'm going to put Savage right under Cody, or right under Pawns, out of protest. But if you guys want to fight me on it, I could be persuaded.
In the spirit of cooperation, I will not fight you on it.
Great. Let's talk Barris Ophi. Oofy? Jedi
You should call her
Padawan.
Barris Oof, because that's how it feels when you play her.
Yep.
I
It's
mean,
also how it feels when you see her in the show.
Oof.
I think she's just at the bottom of C tier. I think she just barely makes it out of D tier. I think that she has enough going on with force push and enough potential for disruption, and hopefully she gets a little better with Plo coming out as well. I think that gives her just enough of a niche, but she more than any other secondary is a primary's kit stapled to worse stats, but she's Asajj's kit stapled to worse stats, and Asajj already suffers from poor stats. So she, like Asajj, is C tier. They're going to do things if you specifically build around getting them the force to do their thing, but it's hard to do. You get a decent reward for it, but it's nothing that you're like, yes, I really, really wanted that.
Yeah.
I will say, she has the potential for the greatest displacement in the game, right? She has
Yes.
4 pushes and a force push on her tree. You theoretically can push someone. I'd have to like really do math, but push someone from the center line back into a deployment zone in a single attack. That being said, she's not really strong enough to do it, but it's really kind of interesting.
Yeah, I think looking at her kit on paper, I think she has 2 jobs that she's supposed to do. The first one is to be kind of a one Padawan mega displacement on a single point. So if your opponent has 2 units, two characters on an objective, in theory she can bomb in, make a big attack, shove her target 3 times and get a free force push on the other, and then flip that point for you that otherwise was uncontestable. The consistency with which she can do that is really tough. Like it's not there unless you're juicing it from other routes, and she just doesn't quite get there. The other thing that she has in her kit is that ability where she gives extra dice to herself and a Jedi primary that if they're both engaged with the same figure. So that kind of seems to be she's supposed to team up with Lumi or someone else on the same point to help knock somebody out. I think she's another one that plays into the Galactic Republic problem of like you kind of need secondaries that can move on to a point by themselves because your supports aren't going to do that, and you just need bodies that can do that. And Barris is really squishy. If she gets onto a point by herself, she will vaporize in a second. I had this happen in the game against Scott a couple weeks ago where I was running here with Vader, and I was like, cool, I'm going to try and maximize what she can do. And she jumped up to the top of a tower, and she made like an 8-die attack into Jango and spiked a ton of successes. And then I looked at her tree and was like, oh, it maxes out at 5. And so she can push Jango to Kingdom Come and flip that point, but she dealt like 5 damage. And then Vader immediately activated and one-shot her. And then she did nothing for the rest of the game. And
Yep.
I think that, yeah, Plo maybe has the potential to bring her up a little bit. I think that if we get some more options for durability down the road, she could go up. But I kind of think that she's just going to be in an awkward place forever.
Yeah, I think
That's great.
Yeah.
Let's talk our last one and one of our most recent secondaries in the game.
the only 5 cost in the game that makes you question what 5 cost even means, because supposedly that means it should be better. So Arsing is an interesting figure. On paper, she seems like she has some potential. I will just get out of the way. She's going to be a C tier for me. And the reason that she's going to be a C tier is that she has a lot of really interesting abilities that give her some flexibility. However, they are either conditional or fall short by the fact that her damage potential is not super high. Sort of the concept, right, as a 5-piece, is that she should either be giving out a lot of support like Kalani does, or she should be giving out a lot of damage. And her damage potential is just not super high. So she maxes out at, I believe, 8, but it's pretty rare that she's going to get that. Her expertise gives her a free damage. Getting 2 to 3 is going to give her a crit and a damage, but it is just not the case that she's often going to get 8 total damage out. And if you're wanting to do pushes, you're limiting yourself to 6 total damage. She has the ability to make multiple attacks, which, if it was something like Anakin where you could target the same person, I think that would be awesome. But you're having to target a completely different character, a different enemy unit with a 5-die attack. So that becomes very situational and not always the optimal choice. I think her hit and run ability is really great. The ability to attack and then reposition for a force. I think that's probably her best ability. Expendable distraction. Okay, great. I can add 3 dice to my attack roll if I have a non-wounded engaged unit all engaged with who I'm targeting, but then they suffer 2 damage. It feels very situational. It feels like, okay, great, I can maybe get something out of it, but it's sort of that same issue that we talked about with Third Sister. If we had a bigger tree, or we could do up to maybe 10 damage, and we could really spike something, that could be a lot more beneficial. Payday, the ability that lets you add a tag after an order card is revealed, that's a really cool ability and concept. It's shared by the bounty hunter supporting unit. My problem is that it costs a force in a list that you are probably bringing Cad Bane that has 2 force. I ran it with Padme and Cad Bane. I ran a list together, so I had 5 total force. I looked at Payday and I said, not once, ever, would I ever pay for Payday to give them like the handmaiden tag. I just wouldn't do it. It is way too bad. So it's an ability that if it were free, it was just something of like every turn you can give your bounty hunters a different tag. I could see that being a really cool ability, a really powerful ability. Having to pay for it, though, makes it an ability that will never get used. She has 8 health, so she's not terribly defensive. She's just really underwhelming for being a 5-cost secondary. And as we've talked before, and maybe this is unfair because he is the best figure, there is no reason that you would ever take Aura over Jango Fett in a Cad Bane list. Never.
Yeah, I would put her in D tier. Like, I'm going to take the people who she fights with are Kalani and Jango, and you would never take Aura over one of them. Those are the 2 things she fights in slot. Her abilities don't work together. You can only trigger one of double the contract, double the payout, or hit and run, which
that
feels like
so frustrating.
Yeah, it's really a frustrating experience to play Aura. So you're like, oh, I have this cool kit, and I literally can't do all of it because the game mechanics don't allow me to.
This feels like a figure. This feels like a figure that they created while they were creating the game, and as they adjusted rules and adjusted timing windows and things like that, she was probably really good in a previous iteration, and then as the game progressed, they kind of just left her. And then when she landed, the rules had changed enough that it wasn't there. Again, it's incredibly hard to design things. Yeah. That would be my assumption of why this works the way it does, because you're right. Like, you could blow your whole force budget in a single turn for no real gain.
Yeah, if she had more potential to trigger that force refresh from CAD, even multiple times on her activation, then I think her stock would go up. I think if Jango was not just so insanely good and also had the bounty hunter tag, her stock would be up. I think that if she could use her whole kit together, her stock would be up. My tinfoil hat theory that I have absolutely zero evidence for is that they specifically were worried about Payday breaking list building in the game. It's a very cool thematic ability, and I love that bounty hunters have it, where they're like, hey, I love that their shtick is you can pay force in order to fit in with anybody else. You can pay them, and they'll join your list and synergize. And I love that CAD's shtick is, yeah, we don't have a ton of force budget, but we get paid back over and over and over again. And so our ceiling is low, but we are able to keep up. Like, those things are very cool. I think wisely, in some ways, they were concerned about, like, if you just make a generically good support, or if you make a generically good unit that can just buy their way into any faction, that has the potential to muscle out a lot of figures from ever seeing play if there's a version of Aura who is just better at the same cost as your in-faction keyworded staple, even with the force cost. So I think they bumped CAD up and they bumped Aura up as a way to sort of put an extra tax to limit how much possible abuse could be there. But yeah, it feels like either they were not playing her correctly in their playtesting, and you missed how the rules would inevitably be, turn out to be called or developed 2 years later after that was figured out. Something went sideways here with her, and she's just really, really underwhelming. Yeah, I would put her at the top of D tier, or the bottom of C tier, but I think that those are both solid options.
Yep. I'm fine wherever you guys feel like putting it. If you want to put it at top of D or bottom of C, probably D, because I'm never going to take her. So
when she becomes a Wookiee or an Ewok one day, and suddenly has a 17 die attack, you'll think twice about Aura Singh. But that's also the question that Matt had of, there's a question of, one day we don't know what tag is going to hit that says if a random Weequay warrior comes out and does an attack, you gain this benefit, and then suddenly Aura Singh goes, oh, that's me, I'm doing 17 damage.
Yeah, it is a little bit frustrating that the best thing that Cad Bane does right now in the game is allow you to take Kalani with B2s in Separatists. That's just strictly better than doing his bounty hunter things. Thematically, like, if there's a unit in the game that is going to do that, it should be a bounty hunter for sure. But it is a little bit awkward that, like, we'll talk about the bounty hunter support in our next video, but the Aura is so underwhelming that it's just hard to find any kind of place for her. You can't ever live her fantasy because the rules don't let you. So, as a quick summary for our audio-only listeners, that's all 15 secondaries in the game right now. I'm going to just run through everything from the top to the bottom. We have Jango at the top of S tier. If you didn't see this, if you watched the audio, but I put about 4 spaces between him and Obi-Wan Kenobi out of hiding, mostly as a joke. Obi-Wan is also in S tier. He's also great, but we do think that Jango is still just head and shoulders above him. Then moving into A tier from top to bottom, we have Kraken, Kalani, Rex, and Sabe. Moving into B tier, we have Bo-Katan, Gar Saxon, and then Ahsoka Tano. C tier, we have Pons, Savage, and Barriss. And then finally in D tier, we have Aura, Third Sister, and Cody. The other thing that I want to emphasize as we close this out, and I probably should have said this at the beginning, I do think that balance in this game is remarkably good considering how new it is, considering all of the things. Really, I think that in a competitive sense, you are totally fine running anything B tier and above. That's not going to raise a ton of eyebrows. And even as you get into C tier, there are plenty of good reasons to run them. And in a casual sense, I mean, the distance between the top of S tier and the bottom of D tier is not so large that you will feel really terrible running anything. I guess if somebody's running a really competitive tournament grinder list and you just threw a bunch of jank together, you might get blown out. But this is more a framework for us to talk about how we think they compare against each other. But I think the distance between the outliers is pretty minimal compared to some other games that we've played and seen.
Yeah. And I'll add in the context from the primary episode that we had, which is all of these are subject to our opinion, to the meta that we've experienced, to the games that we've had. And some of you might go like, Jango sucks and Savage is amazing. And you'll quibble with us and say, and that's great. And you should tell us because we want to make sure we don't have blind spots. And you should put your data in our Google form that JK made to submit your games so that we can get some hard data about what's getting played and what's winning and what's doing well so that we can back up some of these crazy ideas that we have. And all of this is also subject to change as different units come out and mission packs and the rules change.
Yeah, get in the Slack and at me with your opinions as to why Cody is great. And I cannot promise that I will be persuaded, but I can promise that I will listen. And I will probably have a longer conversation with you about it than you would like, because that's who I am.
I can promise that I will listen. I can't promise that I won't laugh at you.
We need to start a running pot of the first person who comes in and talks about why Yoda should be the next this big figure, just to see Matt's head explode.
Don't you put that evil on me, Ricky Bobby.
No.
All right, thank you for joining us. We will have our support list out soon. See you, bye.